Winter of 1979. The town of Linhe at 38 degrees north latitude was at its coldest. As Huokun walked home and approached the alley, he could hear the women's voices from afar, rising higher and higher, sharp and loud, making it impossible to hear what they were arguing about, like barking dogs. He gritted his teeth and hurried towards the source of the sound. As he got closer, he even started jogging. When he bumped into Aunt Wang, she grabbed his sleeve with her thick hand. "Ah, Kun, hurry and go see what's going on. Your wife, Siege, is fighting with Sister Zhang again, saying Sister Zhang's scale isn't fair." All right. Huokun hurriedly responded and dashed towards the vegetable stall. Siege was arguing fiercely with Zhang Qiaozhen, swinging 2 green onions in one hand and banging the weighing scale with the other. "Zhang Qiaozhen, 2 green onions for 2 pounds? You have no conscience. This isn't trading, it's robbery. I can't believe it. How desperate for money are you? Even if you're short of money, don't be short of morals." "You," Zhang Qiaozhen, usually fierce, turned as red as a beet, shaking with anger. "You're the one with a foul mouth like a sewer. Disgusting. The country is blind to waste money on a creature like you." "What did you say?" Siege swung the onions and slapped Zhang Qiaozhen's face with them. "Who are you calling a creature?" "I'll call whoever is a creature." Zhang Qiaozhen, not one to back down, tried to slap back, her nails aiming to scratch Siege's face. Seeing the impending attack, Siege showed no fear. She reached out first, grabbing Zhang Qiaozhen's thin and dry hair. Zhang Qiaozhen winced in pain, but she put even more force into her attack, trying to scratch Siege's face with her dirt-caked nails. Just as it seemed she was about to strike, a strong hand grabbed her wrist. "Sister Zhang, please, show some mercy," Huokun said with a forced smile, though his grip was firm. Seeing her husband intervene, Siege felt more confident. With her hands on her hips, she taunted, "Zhang Qiaozhen, you have no conscience and your scale is rigged. You're like a festering sore on our heads and a pus-filled wound under our feet, rotten to the core." "That's enough." Before Zhang Qiaozhen could respond, Huokun scowled and shouted, "Are you not ashamed enough?" With that, Huokun smiled apologetically and slipped a coin into Zhang Qiaozhen's pocket. "My Siege can be thoughtless. Please forgive her." Though still furious, Zhang Qiaozhen couldn't escalate further. Being apologized to by the only college graduate for miles around was enough to save face. All she could manage was a disdainful snort. Siege, who had deflated like a punctured ball, followed behind Huokun obediently. But when she saw the coin in Zhang Qiaozhen's pocket, she couldn't hold back. With a swift movement, she lunged forward, aiming to snatch it. How dare Zhang Qiaozhen, that witch, get something for nothing. Though Huokun tried to stop her, he was too slow. All he managed was an angry shout, "Li Siege." Siege had already grabbed Zhang Qiaozhen's wrist with one hand and was trying to pry the coin loose with the other. Despite Siege's strength, Huokun couldn't pull her away in time. All he could do was watch silently, his cold demeanor akin to ice. Zhang Qiaozhen continued to resist. "A promising college student like you. Why marry such a shrew? Have you lost your mind?" Those words were like pouring boiling water into hot oil, making Siege shiver. It was her most sensitive and painful spot. She roared and tried to hit Zhang Qiaozhen with her blood-stained hand, but Huokun grabbed her arm and pulled her back forcefully, causing her to stumble. "Have you had enough?" On the iron stove sat a sand pot. Siege, even with her wrapped hands, could deftly lift the lid and pour in the chopped cabbage. Huokun sat by the stove reading a book. The room was dimly lit, and the flickering flames were reflected in his glasses. Through the misty haze, Siege couldn't see his face clearly. On the stove, a few orange peels were being roasted, filling the air with a sour and tangy scent. Xiaoshuang sat on a stool, leaning over the bamboo chair doing homework. The short pencil in his hand was covered with a colorful straw. "Mom, how do you write Jia in People's Liberation Army?" Siege was taken aback, licking her dry lips awkwardly. She stammered, "Mom is busy. Ask Dad." Xiaoshuang pouted, and Huokun glanced at Siege, putting down his book. He reached out and held his son's hand, gently saying, "Look, one horizontal stroke, another horizontal stroke, a vertical stroke, and a hook." Watching the hands of the father and son clasped under the lamp, Siege felt warm inside. Although life was tight, Huakuen had returned to the city, and in the first year of his recovery from the college entrance exam, he had been admitted to university. Seeing a promising job on the horizon and with Xiaoshuang lively, intelligent, healthy, and cute, what more could she ask for? Things would only get better. Huakuen straightened up and, turning his head, met Siege's warm gaze. His eyebrows furrowed imperceptibly, then he looked away without leaving a trace. "What should we have for dinner tonight?" Feeling unexpectedly cherished, Siege had not spoken to Huakuen since she returned in the afternoon. Huakuen never raised his voice, let alone argued with her. But Siege wasn't afraid of Huakuen arguing with her. She was afraid of Huakuen ignoring her. "How about stewed tofu with cabbage?" Siege was unusually attentive and added, "I added some pork belly." Xiaoshuang chimed in, "Mom always adds tiny bits of meat." Just as Siege was about to retort, Huakuen reached out and grabbed her hand gently yet decisively. "Tonight, let's eat out." Such tenderness was something Siege hadn't experienced in years. She even forgot to remind Huakuen about paying the utility bills, the rent, or getting Xiaoshuang new pants. Her shoes were on the verge of falling apart, and Huakuen's Zhongshan suit cuffs were frayed. All these things required money. She nodded mechanically, feeling as though she were being hypnotized. She had a Panamanian suit made of fine fabric that she rarely wore. Tonight, she put it on, wet her hair and combed it meticulously into a neat twist, then pinned it neatly behind her head. Her polyester pants had become stiff after multiple washes, but they fit perfectly, and she had no leather shoes, so she reluctantly put on the pair of worn-out cloth shoes. Huakuen took her to the famous Bianzhou for Xilongbao. Each delicate dumpling was filled with hot, fragrant broth, and the meat was succulent. Huakuen entrusted Xiaoshuang to the neighbor, saying he wanted to have a meal alone with Siege. The neighbor smiled suggestively at Siege, who shyly lowered her head, her heart blooming with joy. Siege took a bite of a dumpling but didn't touch her chopsticks again. She forced down her saliva, her nails digging into her thigh. It had been so long since she had eaten pure meat. Huakuen understood her and picked up another dumpling, placing it on her small plate. "I've already ordered some takeaway for Xiaoshuang." Siege smiled with relief. Just as she was about to pick up the dumpling, she suddenly remembered something. She forced another smile and said, "You have class tomorrow morning. I'll fry you some eggs." Huakuen looked up, a faint spark of anger flashed in his eyes, but it quickly dissipated. He sighed heavily, as if a century had passed, and finally said in a deep voice, "Siege, let's get a divorce." "Let's get a divorce." Siege stared at Huakuen in disbelief, as if struck by lightning. "Let's get a divorce." These few words finally pried open her brain, squeezing in crazily. She burst out laughing, tears streaming down her face in an odd tone. "What a joke! Let's eat. Let's eat." Huakuen remained silent, not even moving, just gazing quietly at her. Siege had never imagined that one day Huakuen would sit across from her, and she felt terrified by how unfamiliar he seemed. In Huakuen's eyes, there was determination, the resoluteness that came after careful consideration. She understood him. It wasn't a sudden impulse, but a decision made over time. Siege wiped away the moisture on her face haphazardly. Her temples felt as if they had been pounded by a hammer, and everything around her appeared distorted through her tear-filled eyes. She covered her eyes with her large, swollen fingers, afraid to cry out loud. She couldn't lose Huakuen. Why? She trembled. She thought they had a harmonious family, adorable children. She thought she would have a happy future, one that seemed within reach. She thought enduring their current hardships would lead to a better life. She wouldn't argue over a scallion or a penny anymore. They would move into a big house. She would buy new clothes and skincare products for herself, and she wouldn't be a haggard woman anymore. But she wouldn't wait anymore. Huakuen wouldn't wait for her, and he deprived her of the right to wait. Huakun looked out into the darkness of the night, his voice seeming to come from the depths of the night itself. I'm tired. Wait for me, please wait for me. I know you despise me for making a scene over a penny, but I won't do it anymore, I'll change. I'll definitely change. Also, you don't like me wearing that floral, tattered undershirt, so I won't wear it anymore, I'll throw it away. I won't pick my teeth at the dinner table anymore. I won't steal water from the public faucet anymore. I won't argue with Zhang Qiaozhen anymore. I'll just avoid her. I'll speak more softly. I'll start reading. I'll read books, Shakespeare, the ones you like. I can even learn calligraphy. I'll change. I can change. I really can. Siege cried so hard she hiccuped, stammering and rushing to speak, her words becoming incomprehensible as she gasped for breath. Huakun watched Siege in silence, his eyes showing a hint of sympathy. I'll take Xiaoshuang with me. He'll be better with me. You can stay in the house, and I'll pay the rent monthly. When my salary comes in, I'll send you some money every month. Or you can go back to Yangar. After all, it's your hometown. Huakun had even thought of an exit strategy for her. But did she still have a way out? Yangar, where the Qinghai Tibet Plateau and the Lus Plateau converge, boasts vast grasslands. It's also her home. During the fervent years of the 5-year plan, when everything within and beyond the Great Wall seemed promising, her father died on the distant Korean peninsula, with his remains lost to oblivion. Her mother struggled to make ends meet with her young daughter. Siege was only 3 years old at the time, and now, looking back, her memories seemed shrouded in a vast expanse of white mist. Yet, within that mist, there was the faint image of a Han woman hunched over, carrying a child in a bamboo basket, chiseling ice from the frozen river. Water was scarce on the plateau, and the melted ice provided the only source for her and her daughter. In her memories, she suddenly grew up, becoming a graceful butterfly dancing on the grassland, her lithe figure complemented by shiny braids, stirring countless heartbeats among the young men of the grassland. When the village party secretary brought a tall teenager to their door, Siege was busy spoon-feeding her mother medicine. Her mother, a Han Chinese woman who had followed her Tibetan father to the plateau, had been suffering from heart problems for years. The party's secretary earnestly instructed the young man, named Huakun, that this family was a model family, Lirshu, and that the mother was still ill. Since he had come to do manual labor in the village, he should stay with them and assist them. Huakun was among the first to be sent to the countryside during the up to the mountains and down to the countryside movement, and due to the remoteness of their location, he was also among the last to return to the city. 10 years flew by in a blink of an eye. From collecting cow dung to herding sheep to chasing away wolves, nothing was too difficult for him. This tall, skinny city boy became the most capable man in the village, earning the most work points. He also read many books and often taught Siege to read and write poems by the dim light of the butter lamp at night. When Siege's mother passed away, Huakun held her tightly in his arms as she wailed and kicked, refusing to let go. Siege, you still have me. Huakun didn't lie. Without a doubt, he entered a university in the city in the year he resumed his college entrance examination. He packed Siege's belongings, clasped her hand in his, and carried their son on his neck. Let's go. The dream shattered at that moment. Siege opened her eyes and stared at the dark ceiling. 10 years of acquaintance, 6 years of marriage, finally dissipated, finally proving she wasn't worthy. She suddenly remembered the year she asked Huakun, "You're a university student, but what about me? I can't read." She still remembered Huakun gently pinching her cheek. "Silly girl, one educated person in the family is enough. You'll manage the household, and I'll handle the outside world. That's a perfect match." She was indeed silly to have believed it. In the harsh winter of 1979, Siege left Linha town alone. When Huakun tried to stop her, she fiercely slapped him across the face, biting her lip until it bled, but not shedding a single tear. After a month of turmoil and tears, Huakun remained resolute. She went to Huakun's school, where the girls in woolen skirts chattered away. "Huakun, how could you marry such a country bumpkin?" Huakun grabbed her collar with a dark expression and thundered, "Go back." On the crowded southbound train, fragments of the past flickered like a movie, as if it were all just a dream. Siege touched the 30 yuan tucked inside her underwear and remembered her son's worn-out shoes. The train was packed and the air foul. Siege hadn't had a proper meal in a long time, and her violent crying made her feel nauseous in the crowd. She didn't know how to get off the train. She stared at the unfamiliar words Chuanha on the station sign and felt dizzy. Back in Yangar, Huakun had used charcoal to teach her to write on a wooden cart. Chuanha is tranquil and bright, with calm waves and boundless skies. Siege bitterly smiled and clutched her bundle tightly to her chest, pushing her way into the surging crowd. For the next 7 years, she disappeared as if evaporating from the earth. Over tea and meals, Zhang Qiaozhen would sometimes sigh with pity. Li Siege must have been scared of living in poverty. Who would bother over a needle or a grain of rice if they had money? At first, there were occasional reports of Siege. Wang Wuzi, who traveled south to trade lumber, claimed to have seen a beggar woman in Chuanha City who looked a lot like Siege. People in Linha town were shocked to learn that a university student could also get into fights. Wang Wuzi, with his lumpy body, was bedridden for several days after being beaten up by Huakun. Huakun gripped Wang Wuzi's collar, grinding his teeth. His eyes, once gentle, now burned with rage. Siege has gone back to the grassland. How could someone as strong-willed as her resort to begging? Even Huakun himself wasn't sure if he was saying this to Wang Wuzi or to himself. He had called the village a few times, asking the old party secretary to send him a letter once Siege arrived in Yangar. But that letter he never received. And so Siege disappeared. Huakun went to Chuanha City once, repeatedly telling himself that he was just uneasy. Lu Susu probably knew more about Siege than anyone else. She was a ballet dancer, spoke English, and was infatuated with him. He didn't expect Chuanha to be so vast. At the train station, his wallet was stolen by a pickpocket. With 8 exits, the train station was like a labyrinth in those days. Penniless, he slept on the station square for 4 days before a friend sent him some money. For the first 3 days, he was famished, longing for a bowl of lamb noodle soup. Driven to madness by hunger, a ragged little girl gave him half a steamed bun. He devoured it, tears streaming down his face. There was no way Siege would resort to begging in Chuanha. The guilt weighed heavily on him, even as a man. In 1986, when the magnolia blossoms were just opening, the air was filled with a rich fragrance. Outside the elementary school gate, a thin child with a large school bag slung over his back had shiny black hair, with 2 little spirals on top. The teacher patted his head. "You can't miss tomorrow's parent-teacher meeting. The junior high school entrance exam is coming up soon." The child nodded heavily, holding back his tears, his nose turning red. He had grown quickly, his pants were already too short, exposing his ankles, and his socks were mismatched. Walking along the moss-covered path, he drooped his head, shuffling in his uncomfortable shoes, dejectedly turning onto Camphor Street. His father hadn't come home yet, and the spacious house felt empty. He reached up on tiptoes to grab a biscuit from the cupboard, stuffing it into his mouth listlessly. He could watch TV since no one was there to stop him, or he could do his homework, but of course, no one would praise him for it either. As the night grew darker, the front door clicked open, and a tall, gentle-looking man walked in carrying a briefcase. The child glanced at his father, expressionless, and continued doing his homework. Huakun took off his suit, rolled up his sleeves, changed his shoes, washed rice, cooked, picked vegetables, stir-fried, until father and son were seated at the dining table. Hua Shuang finally spoke up. "Dad, there's a parent-teacher meeting tomorrow." Huakun's chopsticks paused midair, his heart sinking. "The Bureau of Commerce has an investment promotion event tomorrow. I can't get away. Should I ask Andy's son next door to go?" Facing his precocious child, Huakun sounded somewhat tentative. Hua Shuang neatly placed his chopsticks on the bowl, got up from his chair, and straightened it. "I'll go to bed first, Dad." The bedroom door slammed shut, and Huokun lit a cigarette, his deep-set features flickering in the smoke. 7 years ago, Huokun thought he would raise Huoshuang well and help him succeed, but he hadn't anticipated that due to a lack of maternal and paternal love, Huoshuang would be sensitive and fragile, even withdrawn. Things didn't go as planned. Just as he had once deeply believed that after leaving Siege, he would marry someone like Lu Susu, someone who wouldn't have to deal with mundane matters like firewood, rice, oil, and salt. After washing away all the vulgarity and trivialities, he could live a life of luxury and indulgence. But after Siege left, his life fell apart. When Lu Susu scalded Huoshuang's leg while cooking noodles and cursed him for being immature, Huokun knew he was wrong. He couldn't marry her. 7 years later, he had become proficient in cooking, cleaning, and helping Huoshuang change his clothes and bedsheets. He had gone from a clueless graduate to a top official at the Bureau of Commerce. But he had never considered remarrying. His heart had long been hollowed out. It couldn't be anyone but Li Siege, certainly not that illiterate Li Siege. He just didn't want to marry, and that was that. Later, Huokun tried to find Siege again, personally and through others, but he never heard anything about her again. He moved to a bigger house, but with only him and Huoshuang, the house always echoed emptily. He became busier and rarely cooked. He bought Huoshuang meal tickets for the company cafeteria, but the cook would always complain, "The kid hasn't come again. He's growing and needs nutrition." Yet when he came home from work, there would always be leftover bits of food in Huoshuang's enamel bowl in the kitchen. He knew the child was lying to him. His life seemed to be gradually descending into an abyss with no bottom in sight. He didn't understand. Now that he had a big house and a comfortable income, why did memories of Siege's stubborn face and bloody hands when she clutched a penny always haunt him in his nightmares? That red would eventually turn into a gaping mouth, rushing down to suffocate him, startling him awake, his breath erratic. Occasionally, he would return to the old house, and Zhang Qiaozhen would always exclaim in exaggerated surprise, "Oh, this child looks just like his mother." And then she would abruptly stop. Huokun would smile and exchange pleasantries, but his chest felt like it had been pierced by a sharp knife. And this pain didn't dull with time. It only intensified, like ants gnawing on bones. He became even more frantic in his search for Siege, but he never found any trace of her. In 1992, the merger between the Investment Promotion Bureau and the Bureau of Commerce put Huokun in a difficult position, as two leaders fought for one position, and he, lacking background and resources, found himself at the center of the storm. He couldn't sleep all night, his fingers yellowed from cigarette burns, his hair falling out in clumps. Under pressure, he resorted to binge eating and drinking, revealing the weariness of a middle-aged man at 40. Gossip didn't spare him either. At 40 and still unmarried, rumors of hidden illnesses circulated. But at that point, he had no way out. Those around his age were mostly divorced, with 1 or 2 children. And he feared the stigma of being seen with someone much younger, raising suspicions of cradle robbing. Sometimes he wondered, if he hadn't taken the college entrance exam, he would probably still be in Yanger, with its endless grasslands, mirror-like lakes, and Li Siege, whose laughter sounded like silver bells. He would never have ended up in such a difficult situation. Huokun didn't want to give up halfway through his life, but what else could he do? The director of the Investment Promotion Bureau even brought in the ruthless and decisive female chairman of Rainbow Group, using all means possible. Regardless, Huokun was powerless to change his fate. Rainbow Clothing, founded in Chuanhe, was said to have started as a small workshop with just one sewing machine. But miraculously, in less than 10 years, Rainbow Clothing grew rapidly. It had now established over a dozen large-scale clothing factories nationwide, imported the most advanced machinery from abroad, and wearing a rainbow-branded piece of clothing became a source of pride for many. Rainbow Clothing, living a carefree life, the slogan became ubiquitous. On the day of the contract signing between Rainbow Clothing and Linqiao Town, not a single provincial or municipal leader was absent. Huokun remained hidden behind the high-ranking officials, feeling thoroughly defeated as he watched the balding heads in front of him. Thunderous applause erupted as Director Miao of the Investment Promotion Bureau escorted a woman in a red dress. The leaders in the front row stood up to applaud, nodding respectfully to the woman, and Huokun forced himself to stand as well. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. Huokun stared in disbelief at the alluring woman before him, his eyes and throat dry with pain. Fate was like a huge vortex. He had always thought he was the one stirring up storms, but only now did he realize how small and pitiful he truly was. Li Shizhe. In that moment of eye contact, she too seemed visibly stunned, but she gracefully tilted her head and smiled, diffusing the tension. She looked much younger than her actual age, exuding confidence and grace with every move. Huokun subconsciously pressed his slightly bulging belly. This version of Li Xiege was both familiar and unfamiliar to him. For nearly 2 hours, Huokun endured the signing ceremony as if it were an eternity. Countless questions and emotions swirled in his mind, and 1,000 voices echoed in his ears. She's back. After the meeting, Huokun felt dizzy, almost stumbling into the restroom. He splashed cold water on his face, his mind blank. He didn't even notice the clicking sound of high heels on the tiled floor. Sensing a cold stare, Huokun suddenly looked up and saw his disheveled reflection in the mirror, along with the expressionless face behind him. Xiege. Huokun turned around abruptly, his mouth opening but no words coming out. Li Xiege gave him a disdainful glance, sharp and calm from the ups and downs of the business world. With just one glance, it seemed as though she had already seen through him, making him feel uncomfortable. Walking past Huokun like a passerby, Li Xiege took out a lipstick from her bag, carefully applied it, and glanced at Huokun in the mirror. "Director Hua, are you here to catch up?" Huokun opened his mouth in vain for a moment before finally managing to say, "I know, you hate me." Ha ha ha. Li Xiege laughed as if she had heard a hilarious joke, covering her mouth with mockery. "You're overthinking it. I really don't hate you. Do you know how much money I make in an hour? Who has time to hate someone? Do you know how much my makeup costs? How could I bear to let myself get wrinkles?" Huokoa. Now I know, reading all those bitter poems is nothing compared to having endless money. Trusting anyone is nothing compared to having a big bank account. Only fools get cheated. She laughed again, taking a few steps forward, her breath fragrant. But a little lie won't hurt. Fools die young, but the trouble they cause lasts for 1,000 years. With a light laugh, Li Xiege walked past Huokun, elegant and graceful in her high heels, and Huokun had never smelled that perfume before, feeling a slight intoxication. Power struggles have always been the eternal theme of the officialdom. As the two bureau chiefs battled fiercely, some were caught in the crossfire while others watched like herons and clams, hoping to take advantage of the situation. Wanting to be the hunter, to catch the last cicada, Director Miao did not swiftly take the reins, and Huokun did not retreat to the sidelines. This seemingly one-sided struggle was temporarily deadlocked due to Miao Kongxing's overwhelming momentum. While the magnificent 20-story rainbow clothing building rose in Linhe town, Huokun never saw Li Xiege again. He had tried waiting at the office building, from dawn to dusk, called numerous times, but the receptionist initially said the chairman was busy, and after calling repeatedly, it was just an endless busy tone. His mental state became increasingly irritable, smoking more, and even began to lose more hair. The day after the unveiling ceremony of the Rainbow Building, personnel changes were announced, and Miao Kongxing took office immediately. Huokun was appointed as the Director of Coordination, a promotion in name only. The two continued to maintain a certain balance of power, but he suddenly felt disinterested. In the turbulent officialdom, he no longer had any intention of getting involved. He had more important things to do. On the day of his son's college entrance exam, Huokun put on his most expensive suit. After some thought, he tightened the buttons on his suit and concealed his bulging figure. Leaning against the door frame, his son swung his backpack over his shoulder. "It's not like you're taking the exam," he said with a smile. Huokun smiled back, stuffing a hot milk box into his son's bag and double-checking his ID and exam admission ticket. Sure enough, he saw Li Xiej's car at the entrance of the examination room. He didn't dare to approach, but from a distance, he saw the delicate face of the woman in the rearview mirror. Li Xiej also saw him, gave a faint sneer, and watched her son enter the gate. When he came to his senses, a milk box had already been handed to her. She glanced at the milk box, and Huokun's face showed an unprecedented caution and anxiety. Perhaps it was the heat, or perhaps it was nervousness, but Huokun's forehead was sweaty, and Li Xiej turned her face away, her lips trembling slightly. She was annoyed by her moment of weakness, snatched the milk, and threw it out of the car window, then rolled up the window and turned up the air conditioner several degrees. Unable to resist peeking, Li Xiej saw Huokun, his back to her, picking up the milk box, his figure slightly stooped, and the dark clothes stained with sweat. He had gained weight, and his eyes were gradually clouded. Everything seemed to be falling into Li Xiej's trap. Li Xiej's eyes dimmed, and she started the car with a loud roar. She couldn't explain the emotions in her heart at this moment. This man always disgusted her, 13 years ago and still the same 13 years later. Huokun felt a little heat stroke, stood up dizzily, swaying in the middle of the road. Li Xiej was angry. He had started it all and abandoned her in the beginning. Now, he was playing the role of a victim. This world was always unfair. Men could be scoundrels and repent, and women suffered so much just to reunite with a scoundrel. To hell with reuniting. Li Xiej gripped the steering wheel tightly, stepped on the gas pedal, and drove straight towards Huokun. Huokun's face remained as calm as water, his eyes fixed on Li Xiej, unmoving, with even a hint of a smile between his eyebrows. Squeak. A sharp brake sound. The red car stopped just at Huokun's feet. Li Xiej opened the car door and rushed towards him angrily. Huokun, what do you mean? Huokun smiled at Li Xiej, but his eyes were filled with melancholy. Don't be angry. I missed you that day. Today I just want to say one thing. Li Xiej raised an eyebrow sarcastically, coldly looking at Huokun. I hope you're going to die. Huokun's pupils visibly contracted, and he smiled bitterly, then continued, Miao Kongsheng's waters run deep. He is extremely good at scheming and has a malicious mind. Don't associate with him. His accounts have long been a mess. You see him now, in the midst of a raging fire, but it's also the easiest time for problems to surface. Enough. Li Xiej coldly interrupted him with a sneer. When did you start emphasizing things like this? Aren't you the one who despises gossiping and talking behind people's backs the most? What's wrong with you? Are you anxious? Haha, I forgot. You're just Miao's lackey. Is this jealousy? Li Xiej continued cynically. Speaking of which, I won't associate with him. So should I associate with you? I'm afraid. I know better than anyone your skills in betraying your allies and sacrificing others for your own benefit. Huokun's complexion turned pale and then blue as he listened to Li Xiej's words. He twisted his face into a distorted smile. It doesn't matter how you talk about me. Consider it a plea from me. Don't deal with Miao Kongsheng. His skills are too deep, and his heart is too ruthless. You're no match for him. Plea? Why plead with me? You are Xiao Shuang's mother and my... Huokun realized he was at a loss for words, and Li Xiej had already laughed coldly. Since you're asking me, why don't you kneel down and beg? Li Xiej said mockingly. Huokun stared at her in disbelief, as if trying to confirm whether it was true. Li Xiej smiled like a blooming flower, looking back at him. Was this still his Li Xiej? The cowardly Li Xiej, who always hid behind him timidly pulling at his sleeve. The Li Xiej who blushed and hugged him. The Li Xiej who secretly kept delicious food in her pocket for him. No, it wasn't anymore. That Li Xiej had been killed by his own hands. He wanted to reach out and hold her hand to verify, but he didn't dare to overstep, his hand hanging in the air, empty and ironic. He had thought Li Xiej would always be behind him, no matter how far he went, no matter how long he walked. But now he finally realized it was impossible. It was all his fault. He nodded with a bitter smile, his face pale, his eyes staring at a certain point in the air, stuttering, "Fine, if this is what you want, I owe you, and I will repay you." As he was about to kneel down, Li Xiege grabbed him forcefully, pulling him down with such strength that Huokun stumbled. Her eyes were red, her teeth clenched. "You think too highly of yourself, wanting to kneel down and settle everything. It's not going to be that easy." With that, she grabbed his collar and shoved him backward, causing Huokun to fall down, emitting a muffled thud. Passers-by turned their heads to look, but Li Xiege paid them no mind. "Whatever you do, I will never forgive you." Huokun lay motionless on the ground. Li Xiege leaned in, her eyes darkening. "I will make you regret it." The rest of her words got stuck in her throat. Huokun's eyes were tightly closed, his face pale, his breathing getting fainter with each passing moment. Huokun. Huokun drifted in and out of consciousness in his dream, faintly hearing a sharp female voice angrily rebuking, "What did you say?" He smiled, his suspicions returning to Xiangzhang Street that year, where he saw Li Xiege, who fought with others for a dime. He struggled to open his eyes, surrounded by a pure white environment, with the strong smell of disinfectant assaulting his senses. Li Xiege was arguing with a doctor in a low voice at the door of the ward. Huokun tried to move, wanting to get out of bed to intervene, but the iron bed made a sound. Quickly turning back, Li Xiege saw him waking up. While her eyebrows seemed to relax, her expression immediately returned to a half-smile, half-sneer. She casually approached, "I have good news for you." Huokun didn't understand. "Do you know about uremia?" Before Huokun could respond, Li Xiege leaned in closer, lips slightly parted, smiling with a charming curve. "It's a terminal illness. Unfortunately, you've got this disease." She chuckled lightly. "It's not exactly terminal. I've asked around. Kidney transplants are possible, but 1, there's no kidney source, and 2, you don't have money, so it's essentially terminal." For a moment, Huokun was stunned, but it truly was just a moment. He knew his own body well, but he hadn't expected everything to happen so quickly. He still had important things to do. At this moment, he just felt regret. "I think," Li Xiege's face brightened, "this is karma." "What did you say?" Huokun seemed not to have heard clearly, looking up at her anxiously, his eyes showing a thin layer of mist. Li Xiege's smile deepened, speaking each word deliberately. "I said this is karma." Li Xiege felt a kind of wild joy, as if she were thrusting a knife into rotten flesh, then cleansing the filth. Huokun stared blankly into Li Xiege's eyes. He saw the joyous smile at the corners of her mouth and couldn't help but think of the girl who rode triumphantly on the grasslands of Yanger, one hand holding the reins, the other waving a whip from a distance. That same happiness and smile, no different from today. Over the past dozen years, he had never been happy. For his career, for his child, for Li Xiege. Finally, he could do something for himself. At 40, when faced with life and death, he wasn't without sadness, but he wasn't overwhelmed with grief either. Li Xiege was right. It was karma. Li Xiege stood tall, looking down at him, her expression suddenly becoming crazed. She leaned in close, her voice raising. "Let me tell you, this is karma. Karma." Perhaps too excited, her voice became out of tune, sounding like a sob. Huokun closed his eyes, sinking into darkness. When he woke up again, it was dusk. The setting sun streamed through the window, peaceful and tranquil. Huokun called his neighbor, wanting them to cook for Xiao Shuang, but the neighbor said the child had been picked up by a woman who claimed to be the child's mother. Huokun relaxed, then spoke with the attending doctor. After a while, the doctor couldn't hold back. "Sir, don't give up on yourself. With good care, your condition can improve over the next 10 or 8 years. Is there a kidney source?" Huokun asked suddenly. The doctor hesitated. "No, but this is just temporary." Huokun smiled. "Don't worry, I'll cooperate with treatment. I still have a son to take care of." Huokun hadn't seen Li Xiege for months, not even Xiao Shuang. He didn't know how the child had done in the exam. He knew he had failed Xiao Shuang in many ways over the years. If the child didn't do well in the college entrance exam, it would also be his fault. He became the loneliest patient in the ward. Other beds always had visitors, uneaten milk and fruit, but he was like a solitary figure, waiting alone for the arrival of the Grim Reaper. He thought it might be better to leave the hospital. He didn't want to die in the hospital. The young nurse tried 3 times but couldn't find a spot on Huokun's needle-pierced hand with intact skin to insert the needle properly. She was sweating profusely, and Huokun chuckled, "You go have a meal first, and I'll rest for a while. We'll try again later." The young girl gratefully nodded, and Huokun watched her leave before struggling to get out of bed and retrieve his bag from the cabinet. "Huoju." "Oh, Hua Director, where are you going?" Huokun turned to see Miao Kongxing's face, then turned back to continue packing his things. Unexpectedly, Miao Kongxing grabbed the strap of the bag Huokun was holding. Despite his illness, Huokun remained calm, but he couldn't help but get angry. "What are you doing?" "A wise man doesn't beat around the bush. I came here to ask you for something." Miao Kongxing looked relaxed and at ease. Ignoring him, Huokun continued to pack his things from the cabinet. "It's no use pretending to be deaf and dumb. Your wife and I are tied together like grasshoppers on a string. If you want me dead, I won't let her live." Miao Kongxing spoke lightly, but Huokun knew the weight of the threat. Huokun smiled nonchalantly. "It seems Director Miao hasn't been doing his job well. I've been divorced from Li Xiege for over 10 years. Miao Kongxing burst into laughter. "Do you take me for a fool? If you don't care about your old relationship with Li Xiege, with your stubborn temper, would you have hidden such an important thing until now? You'd have sent me straight to hell ages ago." Huokun was visibly taken aback, but he continued to pack his things as if nothing had happened. However, his hands began to tremble, and he struggled to control it. He pressed his other hand desperately to stop the shaking, but Miao Kongxing had already noticed. "Let me rephrase that. Your son just went abroad. I've checked his tuition and living expenses, nearly $10,000 a year. Did you pay for that?" Huokun wanted to laugh, but he could only force a slight curve on his cracked lips. Miao Kongxing had firmly grasped Huokun's soft spot, even though it was clear that Huokun had grabbed his Achilles heel first. But Miao Kongxing knew that Huokun couldn't afford to lose anymore. He dared not harm Li Xiege again. And when he knew this, Miao Kongxing had already won. "In fact, I knew you had evidence, but I had that foolish woman. I wasn't afraid. But now you're dying." Miao Kongxing leaned in close to Huokun, like a poisonous snake spitting venom. Even his smile was tainted with poison. "I'm afraid that once you're dead, there won't be a fool who would hide such important evidence for a woman anymore. What am I supposed to do then? So, I either need the evidence, or, I'll have to use Li Xiege as a bargaining chip. I'm confident that I can withdraw before I kill her." Huokun felt dizzy and weak, a familiar nausea washing over him. He staggered back to the cabinet, hoping to steady himself against it, but he accidentally knocked it over, causing the thermos and cups to crash to the ground. He fell amidst the mess, hot water splashing all over him, glass shards cutting his hand and drawing blood, but he didn't feel the pain. He struggled to speak. "Don't touch her. As long as I'm alive, I won't touch you either." His plea and attempted bribery seemed to please Miao Kongxing greatly. "But you will die, and the evidence won't." Struggling to prop himself up, Huokun used his bloodied hand to grab Miao Kongxing's collar. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was clearly in a weakened state, but his gaze was as sharp as a knife, sending shivers down Miao Kongxing's spine. "My evidence will die with me." 1993. The following spring, the year after Huokun fell seriously ill, he received a kidney transplant. The surgery was very successful, but Huokun spent nearly a year lying in the hospital before finally being discharged. Standing outside in the sunlight, Huokun felt as if he had entered a different era, reminiscent of the Wei and Jin dynasties, with a faint sense of the Han dynasty. His shirt hung loosely on him, and he tightened his belt, only to find that the belt holes were no longer enough. He hailed a taxi, and when the driver asked him where he wanted to go, he replied, Bureau of Commerce. He had to find Miao Kongsheng. The days that followed were remarkably simple. Huokun returned to work at the bureau, and thanks to his recent recovery, his work was exceptionally light. Xiao Shuang was doing well in England. Unaware of his father's experiences over the past year, he excitedly talked about his studies, life abroad, and exotic experiences. Huokun listened with a smile to his increasingly cheerful son, saying, "I sold the house and saved some money for you. The password is your birthday." "Sold it? Where will you live then?" "I'm alone, and that big house was just too much trouble." Since graduating, Huokun had written more than 10 notebooks detailing his work experience, strategies for overcoming work obstacles, his journey of the heart, and even the unspoken rules of the officialdom. He called in a new clerk and explained everything to him. The clerk was overwhelmed with gratitude, repeatedly thanking his leader for nurturing him. Huokun smiled. "You're about the same age as my son. Learn as much as you can. It'll benefit you." He had only seen Li Xiege once on television. She had lost some weight, her eyes even larger, and she even answered reporters' questions in English, joking about sending her son to England and enjoying a long vacation there over the past year. Huokun reached out and touched the woman in the screen. His lips were as cracked as white snow. He had developed severe postoperative rejection, often running a fever and unable to get out of bed for many days. When he checked back into the hospital, he was already well-versed in the process, admitting himself and taking care of his own food and clothing expenses. The fever came in waves, often leaving him delirious. He frequently dreamed of scenes from his youth, the deep blue sky and lush green grass of the Yanger Prairie, the flying fireflies at the Torch Festival, the sizzling whole lamb on the grill, and the hot milk tea and strong liquor. Most often, he dreamed of those shiny braids and the honey-filled dimples. Sometimes, he dreamed of the present Li Xiege, still with that condescending demeanor, but tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "Huokun, it's so good that you're dead. Now that you're dead, I don't have to hate anymore." These dreams felt particularly real, and Huokun could even feel the tears dripping onto his face, scalding him like fire. He thought to himself that his illness was indeed getting worse. 1993, Bailu. Huokun was taken to the cold morgue. Xiege was in a meeting when her secretary rushed in and whispered something to her. She stood up gracefully, apologized elegantly to everyone present, and hurried to the door. She desperately tried to push open the door, but the secretary, with a tearful face and red eyes, urged her, "Chairwoman, pull, pull." Xiege smiled until she sat in the car, shaking all over as she tried to insert the key into the lock. After several failed attempts, tears burst forth in an instant. Her face still held that stiff, fake smile, but after a while, she burst into tears. "Huokun, look, this is retribution." Retribution. Hua Shuang returned to attend the funeral. He supported his mother, who nearly fainted several times. "Do you hate him?" "Hate. I wish I could tear him apart 1,000 times." Hua Shuang smiled bitterly. "Don't hate him anymore. He missed out, but he has already paid his dues." Huokun searched for Xiege for 10 years. He wanted to tell her that he had lost his mind, that he had been foolish, and that he regretted it. But he never saw Xiege again. After 10 years of painstaking effort, after years of political struggles, could Huokun not deal with Miao Kongsheng? Huokun had long gathered enough evidence against Miao Kongsheng, waiting only for an opportunity to crush his political opponent. But unexpectedly, Xiege re-entered his life, arm in arm with Miao Kongsheng. There are always complicated entanglements between officials and businessmen. The allocation of hundreds of acres of land was a sum of money Li Xiege couldn't explain clearly. Huokun no longer dared to act against Miao Kongsheng. He was afraid of harming Xiege and couldn't afford to make any more mistakes. Miao Kongsheng, however, learned of Huokun's plans and his relationship with Hua and Li. After some effortless investigation, he was certain that Huokun could no longer threaten him. Huokun's winning game plan was completely ruined by Xiege's reappearance. Miao Kongsheng even went to provoke him, threatening that if he didn't hand over the evidence, he would push Xiege into the water first, using her as his stepping stone. Do you dare? Huakuan's eyes widened in fury, like an enraged leopard. But Miao Kongsheng just laughed. You dare not shake my evidence, but I dare to push your woman into the water. From the moment you see Li Siege again, you've already lost. Huakuan knew he was defeated. He made one last request. He would take his evidence to the grave, but Miao Kongsheng must not harm Siege. By moving aside for Miao, even in death, his evidence would not die. He could make room for Miao, but if Miao dared to go back on his word, even in death, he would find a way to bring the evidence to light, leaving Miao with nowhere to hide. Hua Shuang's eyes looked into the distance, where the sunset was blood-red, reflecting in his pupils, desolate and solemn. He didn't die from rejection, but from discontinuation of medication. A dead man poses no threat. Miao will spare you because of this, but a dead man is also the most terrifying. You never know where a dead man will hide evidence, to whom he will entrust it. Miao will never dare to go back on his word. Hua Shuang gently placed his father's diary in Siege's hands. He read through the apologies and love his father had left behind all night. He couldn't say who was right or wrong. He just felt overwhelmed. In 1996, Miao Kongsheng, an official in charge of the economy in a certain province, was investigated. Rainbow Group went public in Hong Kong that same year, with 23-year-old chairman Hua Shuang taking over. The legendary Iron Lady Li Siege had already retreated from the public eye. It was said that she had raised hundreds of acres of orchids and exported them to many countries. As the dusk descended, Siege took off her gloves and instructed the workers to cover the greenhouse. Just as she entered the house, the rain started pouring down. She sat down, then suddenly remembered something and jumped up, not even bothering to take an umbrella, grabbing a raincoat and rushing out. A small grave mound stood alone on the hill behind the house. She hurriedly covered the tombstone with the raincoat, accidentally slipping and falling into the mud. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she wiped them away haphazardly. Growing old was truly painful. Every fall hurt. She didn't hurry to get up. In the fine mist of rain, she buried her face in her arms, her shoulders shaking violently. Had she ever hated Huakuan? 10 years ago, amidst the bustling crowd, she instructed a little beggar girl, "Give this bun to that man over there. Don't say anything, just give it and run." At that time, she herself had not eaten for 3 days. 10 years later, she pointed to her own kidney and told the doctor, "Give it to him. He's dead, and that's too good for him." That surgery had nearly cost her half her life, while she recovered in England for almost a year. But people are always contradictory. Because of her deceased daughter, because of the 10 years of hardship and bitterness, she couldn't bear not to hate him. She would never forgive Huakuan, not even in death. But Siege didn't know that when Huakuan died, he held onto his side tightly until the very end. He knew that beneath him was a kidney desperately telling him, "Stay alive, stay alive." He knew it was Siege's kidney. And on that day, he poured all the pills down the toilet. Huakuan would also never know that during those days when he was seriously ill and unconscious, the woman who always wept in his dreams spent her days and nights by his bedside, tearfully telling him, "Stay alive, stay alive." Many years later, Siege, old and sleepy-eyed, looked at her granddaughter under the dim light, her braids shining, and suddenly smiled like a young girl. In her hazy vision, she seemed to vaguely see the past again. The youth, riding from the depths of the sunset, the horse neighing softly as it stopped steadily, the young man laughing heartily and extending a hand, let's go compete." She quietly wiped